Okay, welcome everybody to the 4-Star Podcast. We are fortunate today to have two of our guests back from last year. And actually, Bobby and Beau, you guys might not realize this, maybe you do realize this, but we started doing videos on TikTok and LinkedIn and Instagram with the episode that you guys did with us back last year. So you're our first TikTok stars. So let's welcome back to the podcast, Robert Elam. And two very experienced cannabis attorneys. And you guys are from San Francisco, but you're in Geneva or Zurich today, right?
That's right. I'm based out of San Francisco. My law partner, Beau Epperly, is based out of Switzerland. And right. Today we're joining you. I'm in Zurich and Beau is in Basel.
Basel, okay. And also with me is my partner, Chris Reardon, here to help ask some questions and learn about what's going on today and an update in the cannabis markets. So it's been an interesting year, you guys. We kind of thought that there'd be some political reconciliation where the two parties would get together and try to make some movement on federal legalization, maybe banking, all those issues. But kind of disappointing that it really hasn't happened, has it? So maybe we can lead with that discussion. Where are we on all that political coming together?
Beau, would you like to start out?
Oh, well, yeah, I'm sorry, Brian, you're exactly right. And by the way, smart to start with us on the first video because you can only go up from us. So well done. Way to set the bar low. 2021 was a disappointing year because I think a lot of people had the anticipation that there would be some real movement on both sides of the aisle, legalizing on a federal level, at least seeing something. And the Safe Banking Act was up for discussion and maybe wasn't as good as some of the other acts that would have fully legalized, but people wanted to see some progress, and we just didn't. And that was disappointing. At the same time, toward the end of the year here in 2021, we saw a lot of prices depressed for pure cannabis, for flower cannabis. And so I think you kind of had a perfect storm of two events that have sort of weighed the industry down a bit. But we're hopeful that things will change in 2022, and there seems to be some early movement in that way.
Good, but there has still been growth, even though prices haven't been that strong. Obviously, the market is growing. Just maybe prices got a little ahead of themselves, and that led to the disappointment. But isn't that the nature of markets anyway? If everybody gets excited, they run the prices up, and then there's a little bit of a pullback. So this is the pullback, right?
I think so, and you can go in and look at some of the financials for these public companies, and if you have access to the private side, you can see the financials on the private side. They're healthy, and they're healthier than they've ever been. And one indicator, for example, is the majority of debt raises even 2 years ago, 3 years ago in 2018 were linked to equity, mostly done through convertible debt and through warrants and things like that, because you needed a backing. In 2021, there was a lot of straight coupon debt being taken out by the bigger players because their EBITDA is so healthy. So the financials are strong in a lot of these companies. So political meanderings aside.
Have you seen Yeah, with it being a down year, have you seen a concerted effort from some of the larger players to try to kind of roll up some of the smaller players and continue to try to, I know that's been kind of a play, is to try to kind of absorb the smaller players. So then when it does finally become, legal, hopefully federally legal, you have, 3 or 4 big players instead of kind of the small. So have we seen that accelerate with it being a down year? People go get capital raises. Have we seen that trend continue, or is it kind of still maintained steady?
Chris, I got to tell you, it's continuing, and it's not just the big eating up the small. It's the medium eating up the small, and the small eating up the smaller. Everyone's trying to get it put in position to do that, and I think the opportunity is local consolidation if you're a smaller business. And if you're a regional business, yeah, you're sort of aiming to roll up into a bigger MSO. But yeah, we're seeing a lot of that.
Okay.
Yeah, well, it's the nature of markets, and you know, cannabis came out with a big fanfare, and then everybody got involved, and then we have a little pullback, consolidation. But as long as you say the fundamentals are healthy, then eventually all that's going to work itself out. So that's exciting. So, Bobby, you had some thoughts on kind of just different themes that you wanted to cover for this session today, and I wanted to see whether you would start those discussions with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you. Building off of what Beau said earlier, 2022 is sizing up politically to be maybe the era, maybe the start of the era of bipartisanship. We've just seen legislation proposed by Representative Nancy Mace out of South Carolina, of all states. That's a pretty big red state there.
Yeah.
And that legislation has the fundamentals of what you would see that could be bridged across the aisle with the Democrats. The decriminalization of marijuana. I mean, all the literature is cannabis, but the schedule says marijuana. Expunging criminal records. We could very easily see reconciliation proposing a federal tax for federal revenue, and we all know that the federal government will need more money. And maybe they throw in finally that Safe Banking Act or banking access of some kind,
Right.
which would get a lot of the cash off the streets. The Republicans are looking at this from the vantage of, well, they're farmers. I mean, guys, it's still a commodity. It's agriculture. I know they try to make it into like nuclear waste with how heavy some of these regulations are, but it's still just agriculture. And going to the lowering of the flowering prices, I mean, come on, like, yeah, what we're talking about here is maybe the price in, let's say, California has gone from $80 an ounce, retail in a store, down to maybe like $35 to $60 an ounce. But if we were talking about blueberries, that would be just, 10 times less or 20 times less than what we're talking about with cannabis flower. It's still a lucrative market with fundamentals. There's also a recent poll that said that 50% of Republicans support decriminalization of cannabis. So I think what we're going to see here is maybe some votes in 2022. Maybe they don't pass so long as the current leadership as it is amongst the parties, and we're going into a midterm election. But I'm hopeful that there's going to be a bipartisan solution sooner rather than later.
Yeah, that'd be great to kind of take the stigma away and get everybody focused on the market in a more healthy way.
In terms of deal flow that we're seeing, or just where money is moving, general numbers are 85% of the capital is flowing to the top. Beau, you can correct me, obviously, 15%, while 85% of the companies are getting no capital except through just very bad terms that are out there in the private markets. That is influencing the consolidation. The smart money is fleeing California and Oklahoma. Those states are perceived as either too regulatory on the California, or Oklahoma, they were passing them out to school children. There's so many licenses that they need to rein it in and figure out how to make the market function. While we have seen capital flowing into like a Michigan or a Massachusetts or a New Jersey, and there's a better understanding of limited licenses, almost like charters, back in the royalty days or whatever, where you might have a lock on a market if you get in early enough, and that has a lot of value.
Bobby, is Oklahoma the only state that was that open with all those licenses like that? Offering them to anyone who would have them?
Across the board, as far as I understand, yes, that is the case. Beau, feel free to correct me, but Oklahoma had that across the board for a lot of different categories. There are other states that handed them out for specific licenses, like categories, and or because of generational or considerations like grandfathered. So for example, in Oregon and California, there was a handing out of a lot of cultivation licenses, and that might have been a bit willy-nilly, just as one example. Yeah.
Really interesting how all these states do it. All right, well, what else?
Well, I think that might, Beau and I are in Switzerland right now, where our law firm is international. We work both in the US and in Europe. And we've been coming to Europe for years now. We started in Spain. Obviously, they had a vibrant dispensary club culture, one of the first in Europe besides like Amsterdam that we were monitoring. We can talk at length about this, but what interests us in Switzerland at the time is that they have a trial for recreational cannabis that's been going on for 3 years, but it's going to be recreational in 2022. And we will be having a workshop in September built around the Cannabis Business Expo and ICBC Global Investment Forum hosted in Zurich. So
nice, great. So anyone can attend that, right? Is that, Bobby? So if folks want Zurich to be part of it.
Yes, and we'll be happy to send you invitations, and feel free to forward them. And again, we're excited to do it because we think that Beau and I, we've been doing a lot of the due diligence side of deals and advisory to investors, as well as to cannabis operators and founders. And what are the right questions? What are the right materials to request? What should be things that you should dig deeper about? I mean, obviously, with the whole Theranos criminal case in the Silicon Valley with Miss Elizabeth Holmes, we now know as investors, we really got to do our due diligence in these areas. So, yeah.
And that just happened this week. So warning to entrepreneurs out there, you better have your act together.
One quick question. I feel like the conception, at least I had even this conception that, the European markets tended to be almost, you would think, ahead of us. When you think European, you think Amsterdam, you think, oh, they're so much more kind of liberal in that front. But it sounds like they're kind of, in some cases, behind us. And then we were talking, is that the case? And is it because it's so bifurcated? There's so many different countries with different laws. You maybe have Amsterdam and that may be ahead, but then, Germany or France that's behind. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I feel like that's the conception there is that Europe would be ahead of the US from the cannabis front.
Yeah, sure. Well, you're right that Amsterdam has long been known as the cannabis hub for coffee shops and things like that. And that does definitely predate California, and certainly from the recreational side. But the laws have never been comprehensive there in the Netherlands, and nor are they comprehensive in Spain, which is another sort of long-standing quote unquote legalized cannabis market. A lot of the laws around both of those locations, let's call them the sort of incumbent locations in Europe, are really around personal liberty and less around business. Contrast that with Germany. Contrast that with Spain. France's new program, Switzerland's program, and what looks to be coming out in the UK, where the measures are taken more from a top-down approach, mimicking pharmaceutical laws and administrative policies. And so that has all evolved fairly recently. And I think Germany is, by most measures, the leader in terms of legalized medicinal cannabis in Europe. And that's only been around for 4 or 5 years. They just announced that they're going to go recreational in Germany. There's a pilot program in Switzerland that's allowing recreational cannabis here in Switzerland. And it looks like, with Macron's comment on cannabis in France, it looks like they'll follow suit soon. So why are they behind? They're behind because California has been much more business forward, as has Colorado and some of the earlier markets in the United States.
Interesting.
It is interesting too, though. But what, I remember going to Amsterdam as late ago as 15 years ago, and there were active hot bars and different locations there. And in a sense, then when they finally open it up for personal liberty, then those players would not want other players in the market. So maybe they opened, just wide enough for them to get in, and they didn't want anyone else in. So maybe there was some resistance from them too, in Spain and in Amsterdam, that they didn't want other players involved, and then they were able to keep it closed for a while. But now it'll probably start to open wider.
Yeah, I think your intuition's probably, there's a lot of truth to that. And, we saw it too in the early times of legalization everywhere with the black market guys coming into the light, as they used to say, and getting them legal and trying to bring them through the process so that they could become legal and bolster the market. And easier said than done. It's hard to go from running a business, getting around the law, to running a compliant business. That's just a totally different mindset and totally different SOPs and operating procedures. So, I think change is always hard as well.
Yeah, and I remember we discussed this on our last visit. That there was all the fear that once we legalized cannabis and people were able to use it for recreational use or whatever, that a lot of people would be getting high all day and they wouldn't be productive and they wouldn't be going to work, and all these fears. And I haven't seen anything like that, but what do you guys see at that front? Has society run aground because of legal cannabis, or are we still in pretty good control on that front?
I don't know if I can comment. I don't think so. I mean, you probably, Brian, you probably see it just as like I do as any other person.
Yeah.
But, gosh, I don't know. It's been a reality for me for so long. I guess I'm kind of numb to it, but maybe Bobby, you have a different impression.
Actually, I guess my impression would be maybe more of society needs to be partaking of cannabis, and we all need to calm down with all of this social media attacks that are just ripping through society. I think we don't need to go much further than the broken down, dysfunctional political systems almost in any country that we're in,
Right.
than to go and attack the voters and what they're doing in their private lives. So
Right.
I really don't think that cannabis, and this actually, as a segue into the political discussion a little bit more, I really don't think cannabis is one of the top 10 ills of society. I don't even know if it's in the top 100 if we were really to go down it. And that's unfortunately why it's so hard to get political momentum in this sector. It is just not a top priority for the two political parties that are running in these elections. That it's now becoming bipartisan, and there's been several big votes on it. That is hopeful, but a lot of the outcomes and solutions that are going to take place are in the private sector, and the U.S. just has a massive edge in the private sector over Europe, for example.
Yeah, and that's primarily because of our aggressive capitalism and folks seeing opportunity there. It sounds like to me, and that's just kind of an American thing, isn't it?
It is, and we reward entrepreneurs and we reward risk takers. And if we don't keep on doing that, then the outcomes or the results won't be as great. But you know what? Hey, I like to tell all my European friends when I'm in Europe, no other country in the world gave us more than one COVID vaccine. Yet we were able to hit a home run with Moderna and Pfizer, and the third one is Johnson and Johnson. So what other country did that? It's because we reward entrepreneurial spirit and innovation. So we're very hopeful with the US market. We were really hoping that the European market would be ahead of it, largely one of the advantages of Europe is that we thought there might be less conflict at the political level, but it seems to be that the market is, and Beau, feel free to take this over, is just really going to go the route, at least in some countries, of big pharmaceutical companies or established companies as the trusted, authorized, establishments for picking up your cannabis, just like if you were to pick up other medical products in Europe.
Mhm.
It certainly seems to trend that way, from what I can see on this side, and it's a much more measured approach. It's a much more conservative approach, and it's very logical. It's a very logical way to approach it. Pharma works. Where I live here in Basel, we've got two of the biggest pharma companies in the world with Roche and Novartis. They know how to do it. It works. It works really well. They make a lot of money doing it. But again, you sort of undercut the market for entrepreneurial activity. It takes time. You lead with, when you take that approach, you tend to lead more with bureaucracy than you do with innovation. And so will Europe get there? I think it will get there. And I think it's just a slower approach. And everyone's still looking to the United States to sort of, bring it home first and let us be the guinea pigs, which, the US is happy to do in most cases, and very successful at. But I think that's the way they're going to go.
Yeah. Well, and maybe that foretells the future in America too. We have an aggressive entrepreneurial culture. And then eventually, once all these consolidations happen, maybe the big capital players will get into it once things are more liberal politically, banking and the politics of it, that, maybe the big pharmaceuticals in America end up owning the cannabis trade over time. That, I guess anything's possible, isn't it?
It will happen. You heard it here first. On your podcast, Brian. That will happen. It will happen.
All right.
And I know there's already contracts in place in that direction. So that will come. No question about it.
Well, and also,
go ahead.
I just want to add, again, it's not too late to get into this sector. There's not one, there's not two, and I'm sure there's probably more, but there's at least 3 pops in this sector that if any one of the 3 occurred, then an investment prior to it will realize appreciation. One of them is this whole banking access issue.
Right.
If you have banking access, then you get equity lines. And if you got equity lines, like any normal business, then you can start to float your payroll and your inventory, which just means that you can sell more stuff and be open longer and be more successful. They don't have it yet. So once that happens, that's great news. You've already talked about the whole consolidation thing, and if it's being traded on open markets and more capital comes in, and it's already been demonstrated by Canada, and even now with some of the MSO buys in Michigan and Florida, a $500,000 deal with Gage in Michigan or whatever.
$500 million.
$500 million, my bad. $500 million.
Yeah.
You're just seeing like real big checks being written. But the third one, and Beau, I mean, you wrote you're the authority. You wrote an article in a legal journal about this. Is this whole 280E section part that's really impacting the EBITDA and just what the returns are? And there's going to be a pre-investment time, like right now, and a post-investment time. And if they were just to change that law or decriminalize or deschedule cannabis, that could be a massive pop for an investment.
Could be, yeah. Well, one thing I can definitely just say on a local basis, and Chris, I don't know if you've experienced this, but now when you're walking around downtown in the city, or I was at the Chicago Bears football game the other day, and all of a sudden you just get little whiffs of cannabis. Somebody smoked or was smoking or whatever. So, and that used to be obviously illegal, right? And now it's not anymore in certain states, and certainly not in Illinois. And so they used to smell that, and you're like, uh-oh, what's going on? Now it's like, hey, that's kind of normal, right? It's not a big deal. So we definitely have seen some change in society, that the smell of burning cannabis or the smoke is certainly around, and it's not a big deal. It's not like anybody's doing anything wrong because it's legal, right? So
Well, and I think that's even, you have it more accessible here than ever. I mean, actually, I live in the city, and I think I've gotten 2 in the last week of dispensaries opening within, I don't know how many blocks of, where I live. So they continue to kind of expand here in Chicago. And it's, I think for the millennial age group and even lower, we grew up with it being more akin to kind of alcohol, if you will. And I think that the mindset is there in the younger generations that it's not as big of a deal. And that's why, and I think you guys had alluded to a little earlier, as Congress and I think as the political environment continues to, you have some of the younger newcomers start to gain more of a foothold. I think it's gonna, that's what's gonna lead to it ultimately being passed at the federal level. I just think, the younger generations, it's not as big of a deal as it used to be, 20, 25 years ago. It doesn't have the same kind of image that it used to have.
yeah.
Yeah, there's no question about it, Chris. I think you're exactly right. And even from the time when I graduated high school in 1996 to age myself, and that's the same year that the Compassionate Use Act was passed in California. And I can remember coming out of high school and just even then people weren't quite sure what to do. It's kind of legal, it's kind of not legal, and to see the evolution of it from that time till now, it's incredible. And I think for younger people, but let's not forget, my parents' generation was the counterculture, so they had a certain perception too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and we did go through the temperance movement and prohibition in America. So alcohol went through this process, and cannabis is going through this process. So eventually the public gets comfortable with things over time, but it doesn't happen overnight, right? So we're in that process right now.
Mm-hmm.
But hearing you guys talk, I did want to point out that clearly some of the stock prices are down and some of the businesses down. So maybe 21 wasn't a great year, but it's not like all markets. So now there's a consolidation going on. There's some touch points that could make things accelerate again. Banking access, political access, acceptance by more states, maybe European access more broader than it has been. So there's a lot of opportunity for growth still, even from this level. And of course, Chris, we have to put out the caveat, of course, that any investors who chose to be involved in any private investments or public investments regarding cannabis or any other commodity related or other companies, it has to be appropriate for them, and they have to make sure they do the right thing. Talk to your financial advisor to make sure if you're making these investments that they're right for you and right for your portfolio. But sounds like a lot of markets where we ebb and we flow and we move back around, and there may be some opportunity from these levels that we didn't really maybe anticipate when we did our last visit.
And just to add to that, I think wasn't there just a huge plunge on the NASDAQ that people are talking about right now? And how many times have I seen an article online about what are the recession-proof stocks, or what are the dividend aristocrat stocks that I should be looking at, or whatever? Going back to what Beau said earlier, these businesses are deemed in most states to be essential businesses that will remain open like a grocery store or hospital, regardless of anything that's happening with the COVID variants. And people will still continue to buy cannabis, whether in the good times and in the bad times. So while it is ebbing right now, Beau and I, just for full disclosure, have been buying stocks in cannabis for the first time. This has been the first time that we both, as a concerted effort in our own personal lives, have just started buying because we just think it's an opportunity to jump into the market.
Yeah. Well, that we'll see how that proves out. We just went to obviously 2020 was a very wild year with the pandemic coming in and the big market crash and then the recovery. And then this past year, we saw a decent upward moving market, but it consolidated into some narrow list of names, large technology names and things like that. The passive massive names, if you will, the large companies. And so the average stock didn't do as well as those names and certain indexes that were overweighted in those names. So, these are usually not the conditions where markets top out. We've had a growth market for quite a while, but yet everything is really not at its highs. The market indexes might be, but there's some opportunity there, and looks like there might be some opportunity in the whole cannabis sector for investors, with a long-term horizon. As you said, we had a big market pullback yesterday. It started again today. Now it's, kind of rallying again, Chris, isn't it? But, now, there could be some opportunity here. So, and certainly cannabis might be a great way to invest if you're so inclined, if it's appropriate, and it's a part of a diversified portfolio, right? Is how we always like to go. So.
Yeah, and when thinking about the cannabis sector, just keep in mind that also means, at least to Beau and I, the whole CBD component of it, the picks and shovels component of it, the fertilizer component, hydroponics, real estate, right? And so branding, franchising, even though that's just a novel concept in most states at this time, those discussions are being had right now. So there's many different touch points in the cannabis sector.
Yeah, there are many ways to invest in private investing, as you say, the infrastructure and all the other aspects of it, just like any other commodity market. So choose your vehicle, basically. There's lots of options there. Well, great. Well, what else did we miss, guys? Anything else we should kick around?
Beau, you got anything?
No, I think this has been a great discussion, and we've certainly covered a lot of ground. What I would like to say is we'd certainly like to touch base with you later on and just see, because I do have a suspicion that the market will become hot as if some of these things do come to fruition. It'd be just interesting to monitor that if and when it does.
Yeah. No, that sounds. Go ahead, Bobby.
And I just want to take the time to thank you, Brian and Chris, for the opportunity to join you for our second podcast. Very exciting.
Excellent. Well, we'll do it again, and we really appreciate the update. It sounds like there's some opportunity here still. There's a great idea to go to the conference in Zurich in September. So if anybody's interested in that, just get in touch with us and we'll make the connection. So it's really just a fascinating thing. And if you're a student of markets, student of investing, it's just great to watch all these things develop, and the ebbs, the flows, the opportunities, the news items, the touch points. There's lots of opportunity for entrepreneurs to do well and investors to invest alongside them, which is really fun. That's the fun part of capitalism.
Yeah. And it's a great market to do it in, because it's a very interesting market. It's different.
Absolutely. Well, great. Well, guys, thanks for being with us today, and everybody. We'll do another update again soon as we get more developments and more information. Thanks, guys, all the way from Switzerland. That's amazing. Thanks for being with us here on the 4-Star Podcast.
Thanks for having us, gentlemen.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Take care.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.